The assembly hall was the largest structure ever built by any species in the known galaxy. It floated in the empty space between three great nebulas, far from any star system, a symbol of unity and cooperation. That was what the founders had called it. Anyway, Ambassador Elena Vasquez knew better. After 63 years of membership in the Galactic conquered, humanity had learned that the assembly hall was not a place of unity. It was a place where the powerful reminded the weak of their place. Elena stood at the human delegation's platform, positioned at the outermost ring of the circular chamber. From here she could barely see the center of the room, where the three core species sat on elevated platforms made of crystal and light. The Valorans, with their tall bodies and forearms, looked down at everyone else with the calm patience of a species that had ruled for 12,000 years. The Keth collective, a hive mind of insect-like creatures, buzzed and clicked in their shared consciousness. And the Morath ascendancy, massive beings with gray skin and too many eyes, watched everything with cold calculation. These three species had built the conquered. They had written its laws. They had decided who could join and who would be destroyed. And for 12 millennia, no one had challenged them. Elena adjusted her formal jacket and looked at the other human delegates behind her. There were 12 of them, representing Earth and its 47 colony worlds, compared to the hundreds of delegates from the core species. They were nothing. A small group at the edge of a vast room, easily ignored and often forgotten. That was exactly how the core species wanted it. "The session will begin," announced a mechanical voice that echoed through the chamber. "All species will observe proper protocol." Elena had heard these words thousands of times. Proper protocol meant that junior species would speak only when allowed. It meant that humans would wait for hours while the core species discussed matters among themselves. It meant that any petition from humanity would be delayed, reviewed, and ultimately denied. She had been ambassador for 11 years. In that time, she had submitted 42 formal requests for colony rights in the outer reach, a region of space so far from the galactic center that no other species wanted it. Every single request had been denied. The reasons changed each time, but the result was always the same. Humanity was not allowed to grow. Elena had accepted this for a long time. She had told herself that patience was the answer. Humanity was young. They had only discovered faster than light travel 80 years ago. The core species had been sailing between stars when humans were still living in caves. Perhaps Elena had thought they simply needed to prove themselves. Perhaps if they followed every rule and showed proper respect, they would eventually be accepted. She did not believe that anymore. The data pad in her hand felt heavy. It contained files that had arrived from Earth just 6 hours ago, transmitted through secure channels that even the Concord's intelligence services did not know about. Elena had read the files 3 times. Each time she had felt the same cold anger settle in her chest. The session began with trade disputes, as it always did. A species called the Fenari complained that Morath cargo ships were charging illegal fees at jump gates. The Morath delegate dismissed the complaint with a wave of his massive hand. The High Arbiter, a Valoran named Ketharin, ruled in favor of the Morath without even pretending to consider the Evidence, Alina watched and said. Nothing, the other junior species did. The same, they had all learned that. Speaking up only made things worse. Alina's legs ached from standing, but she did not sit. Human delegates never sat. During sessions, it was a small act of defiance, one that the core species probably did not even notice, but it mattered to Alina. It reminded her that she was not here to be comfortable, she was here to represent her people. Finally, during a brief pause between agenda items, Alina raised her hand. The chamber fell silent. Humans rarely requested the floor. When they did, it was usually to make some minor administrative request that would be quickly denied. High Arbiter Kethvon looked at her with his large dark eyes. His forearms were folded across his chest in the Valorian expression of mild annoyance. The human delegation wishes to speak. Yes, High Arbiter, Alina said. Her voice was calm and clear. I have a matter of urgent importance to bring before the assembly. Urgent importance. The KE collective speaker made a sound that might have been laughter. What could be urgent to a species that has existed for such a short time? Alina ignored the insult. She had heard worse. I request permission to address the full assembly on a matter of galactic security. This caused a stir. Junior species did not speak about galactic security. That was the domain of the core species alone. Kephorin and LT Unc and GT eyes narrowed. This is highly irregular, I understand, High Arbiter, but the matter cannot wait. There was a long pause. The three core species exchanged looks that Alina could not read. Finally, Kethorin nodded. Slowly, you may speak, human, but be brief. The assembly has important matters to discuss. Alina stepped forward to the speaking platform. Small circle of light in the center of the chamber. She felt the eyes of 1,000 delegates on her. Some were curious, some were annoyed, most simply did not care. She took a deep breath and began. 63 years ago, humanity joined the Galactic. Conquered. We were told that membership would bring peace, prosperity, and protection. We were told that the conquered existed to help all species grow and thrive together. We believed these words. We followed every law, paid every tariff, and showed respect to species far older and more powerful than ourselves. She paused, looking around the chamber. We were patient when our requests for colony rights were denied. We accepted the decisions and tried again. When our trade ships were charged fees that other species did not pay, we paid them without complaint. When our people were treated as lesser beings, we told ourselves that this was the price of being young. We told ourselves that things would get better. Even the Keth had stopped their constant buzzing, but things did not get better. Alina continued, and this morning I learned why. She touched her data pad, and the files she had received from Earth appeared on every screen in the chamber. Documents, communications, and recordings filled the displays, written in the formal language of the core species. These files were obtained by human intelligence services over the past 11 years. Alina said they document a secret agreement between the Valor High Council, the Cath Collective, and the Morath Ascendancy, an agreement called Operation Quiet Extinction. The Morath delegate rose from his seat, his many eyes wide with shock. This is outrageous. These documents are clearly forgeries. Alina ignored him. Operation Quiet Extinction has one goal: to ensure that humanity never becomes a Significant power in the galaxy. The methods include economic suppression, technological embargoes, and denial of expansion rights. The documents also describe contingency plans for the sterilization of human colony worlds if our population continues to grow. The chamber erupted. Delegates from dozens of species were shouting, demanding explanations, calling for order. The junior species looked at each other with expressions of fear and recognition. They had always suspected that the core species had secret agreements. Now they had proof. High Arbiter Kether slammed his hand against his podium, demanding silence. These accusations are baseless. The human delegation will withdraw these false documents immediately or face sanctions for spreading dangerous lies. Alina smiled, but there was no warmth in it. The documents include communication codes that can be verified by any species with sufficient technology. They include timestamps, authorization, signatures, and references to previous operations against other species that no longer exist. She looked directly at the High Orbiter. The Valen, the Drawex, the Morwen, all of them were once members of this conquered. All of them are now extinct. Your own records say they died out naturally or destroyed themselves through war, but these documents tell a different story. The silence that followed was absolute. Every delegate in the chamber understood what Alina was saying. The core species had not simply ruled the galaxy for 12,000 years. They had shaped it. They had decided which species would survive and which would disappear, and now humanity was on their list. Kesver's 4 hands were shaking. Alina could not tell if it was from anger or fear. How did you obtain these files? Alina's smile grew slightly. You made a mistake. High Arbiter, you assumed that because we were young, we were stupid. You assumed that because we were weak, we were blind. You watched us follow your rules and pay your taxes, and you thought we had accepted our place. She shook her head slowly. We never accepted anything. We were simply waiting, learning, preparing. The Moreth delegate's voice was a low growl. Preparing for what? Alina did not answer immediately. Instead, she looked around the chamber one more time, making sure that every species could see her face. Then she turned back to the core species and spoke in a voice that carried to every corner of the vast room. We were preparing for the day when we would stop asking for permission to survive. She stepped back from the speaking platform and returned to the human delegation's position. Behind her, the 11 other human delegates stood in perfect stillness, their faces showing no emotion. Assembly Hall had seen many dramatic moments in its long history, but it had never seen anything like this. A junior species had just accused the rulers of the galaxy of genocide and conspiracy. And instead of begging for mercy, they had smiled. High Arbiter Ketheron stared at the human platform for a long moment. Then he turned to his fellow core species delegate. Something passed between them, a silent communication that Alina could not read. She did not need to read it. She already knew what they were thinking. They were thinking about how to make the humans disappear. And that, Alina thought as she stood straight and tall at the edge of the chamber, was exactly what she wanted them to think, because while they were busy planning humanity's destruction, they had no idea what humanity was planning in return. The game had finally begun. The chaos in the assembly hall lasted for nearly an hour. Delegates shouted at each other in dozens of languages. Security drones flew overhead, their sensors scanning for weapons or threats. The three core species sat on their elevated platforms and said nothing, their faces impossible to read. Elena Vasquez stood at the human platform and watched it all with calm patience. She had expected this reaction. In fact, she had counted on it. The junior species were the most affected. Many of them had lost friends and allies over the centuries. Species that had simply vanished one day, their colonies empty, their ships drifting without crews. The official explanation was always the same: internal conflict, plague, or natural disaster. But now they knew the truth. The core species had been pruning the galaxy like a gardener removes leaves. A delegate from the Fenari, the small furry species that had complained about trade fees earlier, his whiskers were trembling with fear. Ambassador Vasquez, he said in a low voice, are you certain about these documents? If you are wrong, the core species will destroy your people. They will not even hesitate. Elena looked down at the small creature. I am certain, she said, and I know what we are risking, but the alternative is to wait quietly while they destroy us. Anyway, at least this way we have a chance. The Finari delegate nodded slowly. I hope you are right, human, for all our sakes. He returned to his platform, looking smaller than before. Elena understood his fear. The Finari had been members of the Conquered for 3,000 years. In all that time they had never challenged the core species. They had survived by being useful, by being quiet, by being no threat to anyone. It was a strategy that had kept them alive. Elena did not judge them for it. Every species found its own way to survive. But humanity had tried the quiet approach for 63 years, and it had led them to the edge of extinction. Now it was time to try something different. High Arbiter Ketverin finally raised his hand and the chamber fell silent. His voice was cold and controlled when he spoke. The human delegation has made serious accusations against the core species. These accusations are based on documents that have not been verified by independent observers. Until such verification can be completed, the Assembly will treat these claims as unproven. Elena had expected this response. Delay and denial. It was how the core species had always handled challenges. They would form a committee, launch an investigation, and quietly make the problem disappear. By the time the investigation was complete, humanity would be just another footnote in galactic history. With respect, High Arbiter, Elena said, stepping forward. Again, verification is already possible. Every document contains authentication codes that match Valoran security protocols. Any species with level 3 encryption access can confirm their authenticity within minutes. This caused another stir in the chamber. Level 3 encryption was supposed to be unbreakable. The fact that humans had not only obtained documents protected by this encryption, but also understood how to verify them was deeply troubling to the core species. The KTH collective speaker clicked rapidly, a sign of agitation in their species. How did the humans obtain level 3 access? This is impossible. Their technology is too primitive. Elena allowed herself a small smile. We have had 63 years to study your systems, collective. We learned your languages, your protocols, and your weaknesses. You never bothered to study ours. You assumed there was nothing Worth learning, the Marath delegate slammed his massive fist on his podium. This human is clearly attempting to divide the conquered with lies and tricks. I call for the immediate arrest of the entire human delegation under Section 47 of the Conquered Security Act, Section 47. Elena knew it well. It allowed the core species to detain any delegate accused of threatening galactic security. Once detained, the delegates could be held indefinitely while an investigation was conducted. No trial, no evidence required, just a vote by the core species, and the humans would disappear into a prison station somewhere, never to be seen again. Keith Voron nodded. Slowly, the Marath delegate raises a valid point. The security of the conquered must be protected. I call for a vote on the detention of the human delegation. Elena felt her heart beating faster, but she kept her face calm. This was the moment she had prepared for, the moment when everything would change. Before you vote, she said, her voice cutting through the murmurs in the chamber, I would like to present additional evidence that directly involves every core species delegation present today. Keith Voron hesitated. What evidence? Helena touched her data pad again. New documents appeared on the screens, and this time the reaction was immediate. The subject is the human colony on Kepler 442b. The message reads, the humans have exceeded population projections by 15%. Recommend accelerating the timeline for Phase 2 intervention, sterilization. Agents can be introduced through water processing systems within 6 months. Chamber was completely silent. Elena continued, this response is from war. Commander, the rule agreed. Humans breed faster than anticipated. Their genetic diversity makes targeted biological agents difficult. Recommend full sterilization of all adult females, and the colony can be disguised as a medical assistance program. She looked up from the data pad, her eyes meeting Cathorin's. The colony on Kepler 442b received a medical assistance program from the Valoran Health Initiative 11 years ago. Since then, the birth rate on that colony has dropped by 92%. The colonists believe they are suffering from an unexplained fertility crisis. They have been begging the conquered for help for nearly a decade. The Fenari delegate was weeping openly. Other junior species delegates were holding each other, their bodies shaking with fear and grief. They had suspected, but they had never known for certain. Now they knew. You have been killing us, Elena said slowly, quietly, and carefully. You smile at us in this chamber, and then you go back to your ships and plan our extinction. You have done it before to other species. You are doing it now to us, and if we had not discovered these documents, you would have continued until humanity was just another name on a list of species that no longer exist. Kepharon finally spoke, his voice barely a whisper. How did you find these communications? They were protected by the highest security measures in the galaxy. Elena nodded. Yes, they were, and for a long time we could not break them, but you made one mistake, High Arbiter. You assumed that the only threat would come from outside. You never imagined that the threat might come from within your own systems. She turned to look at the KE collective delegation. 23 years ago, a human scientist named Dr. Sarah Chen developed a new method of artificial intelligence. It was based on a principle that no other species had ever explored: the ability to learn from Mistakes rather than simply processing. Data. This AI learned the Valorant encryption systems not by breaking them directly, but by studying how they were used. It watched patterns, analyzed habits, and predicted passwords. The catch speaker hissed, "This is impossible. AI systems cannot learn in this way. Your AI systems cannot," Alina agreed, "but ours can because we built them differently. We did not try to copy what already existed. We created something new." This was the part that Alina knew would hurt the most. The core species believed that they were the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy. They believed that younger species could only ever catch up, never surpass them. The idea that humans had developed technology that the core species did not understand was deeply offensive to their sense of superiority. The Morath delegate's voice was dangerous and low. "You admit to espionage against the conquered. You admit to developing prohibited technology. You admit to stealing classified documents. These are acts of war, human." Alina turned to face him directly. "No, War Commander, these are acts of survival. There is a difference. War is what you do when you want to conquer. Survival is what you do when someone is trying to kill you." She stepped back to the human platform and stood with her fellow delegates. They were 12 against thousands, a tiny island of humanity in a sea of aliens who now looked at them with fear and hatred. "We know what you are planning," Alina said. "We know about Operation Quiet Extinction. We know about the biological agents, the economic sabotage, and the fleet movements that you think we have not noticed. We know everything, Kev." Vorin leaned forward, his dark eyes fixed on Alina. "And what do you intend to do with this knowledge, human? Expose us? The junior species will not help you. They are too afraid. Attack us. You have 47 warships. We have 47,000. You cannot win this fight." Alina nodded slowly. "You are correct, High Arbiter. We cannot win a direct fight, but we are not planning to fight directly. We are planning something much worse." She smiled, and for the first time Keth Veron looked truly afraid. "Tomorrow, at the start of the next session, I will present humanity's formal response to Operation Quiet Extinction. I suggest that every delegation be present. What we have to say will affect everyone in this chamber." Without waiting for a response, Alina turned and led the human delegation toward the chamber doors. Behind her, the core species watched in silence. They had expected the humans to beg for mercy or to threaten war or to simply collapse in fear. They had not expected this quiet confidence, this calm certainty. As she walked, Alina heard the whispers spreading through the chamber. The junior species were talking among themselves, asking questions that they had never dared to ask before. The core species were trying to regain control, but for the first time in 12,000 years they were not sure how. In fact, Alina knew that the hardest part was still to come. Tomorrow humanity would show its true hand, and the galaxy would never be the same again. She just hoped that humanity would survive to see what came next. Alina Vasquez did not sleep that night. She sat in her small quarters on the human diplomatic ship, staring at the stars through her window and thinking about what she would say. The next day, the words had been prepared for years, rehearsed 1,000 times in secret meetings on Earth, but now that the moment had arrived, they felt heavy in her mind. Her communication device beeped. A message From Earth encrypted and bounced through 7 relay points to avoid detection. She read it quickly, all assets in position awaiting your signal, good luck ambassador, humanity is watching. She deleted the message and took a deep breath. In 12 hours everything would change, either humanity would win its freedom or it would die trying. There was no middle ground anymore. The next session began exactly on time. Elena noticed that the chamber was more crowded than she had ever seen it. Every species that had a delegation in the assembly was present, from the smallest junior members to the 3 core species. On their elevated platforms, word had spread about what the humans were planning. Everyone wanted to see what would happen. High Orbiter Kefyern opened the session with unusual formality. The assembly is called to order. Before we proceed with regular business, the human delegation has requested time to address the chamber on a matter of urgent importance. This request is granted. Elena walked to the speaking platform. The eyes of 1,000 aliens followed her every step. She could feel their fear, their curiosity, and their doubt. Most of them expected her to fail. Some of them hoped she would succeed. A few of them were already planning how to profit from whatever happened next. Yesterday, I presented evidence of a secret plan by the core species to systematically eliminate humanity through economic suppression, technological embargo, and biological warfare. The core species have not denied these accusations. Instead, they have threatened the human delegation with arrest and imprisonment. She paused, letting her words settle over the chamber. Today I am here to present humanity's response, not a plea for mercy, not a declaration of war. Something different. She touched her data pad and a new image appeared on every screen in the chamber. It showed a complex network of lines and nodes stretching across a map of the entire galaxy. This is the Concord's FTL relay network. Elena said it consists of 473 relay stations positioned at strategic points throughout civilized space. These relays allow ships to travel between star systems in hours instead of centuries. Without them, galactic civilization would collapse within a generation. The core species delegates shifted uncomfortably. They knew what the relay network was. Of course, they had built it 12,000 years ago. It was the foundation of their power. What most species do not know, Elena continued, is that the relay network has several critical weaknesses, single points of failure that, if disrupted, would cause a cascade effect throughout the entire system. The Morath delegate rose to his feet. This is classified information. How do the humans know about relay vulnerabilities? Elena ignored him. Over the past 60 years, humanity has conducted a detailed study of the relay network. We have identified 732 vulnerabilities, including 47 that would cause total system failure if exploited simultaneously. She let that number hang in the air. We have also positioned assets at each of these vulnerable points, small devices hidden in debris fields attached to the hulls of abandoned ships or floating the void between stations. These devices are not weapons in the traditional sense. They are disruptors. Each one can generate an electromagnetic pulse powerful enough to disable a relay station permanently. The chamber erupted in noise. Delegates were shouting, demanding explanations, accusing humans of terrorism. But Elena noticed Something else, the core species were not shouting, they were sitting in absolute silence, their faces showing the first signs of real fear. Kevorin raised his hand for silence. When the chamber finally quieted, he spoke in a voice that was almost a whisper. You are threatening to destroy the relay network. Alina shook her head. No, high Arbiter, I am not threatening anything. I am explaining our insurance policy. She touched her data pad again and new data appeared on the screens. The devices I mentioned are connected to a system we call the dead man's switch. Every 36 hours, the human delegation must transmit a specific code to this system. If the code is not transmitted, or if the wrong code is transmitted, the devices activate automatically. She looked directly at the core species platforms. If humanity is attacked, the network falls. If our delegation is arrested or harmed, the network falls. If our colonies are invaded or our people are killed, the network falls. There is no way to stop it once the process begins. The devices cannot be recalled, deactivated, or bargained with. They simply wait for the signal. And if it does not come, they act. The KE collective speaker broke the silence. This is madness. You would destroy galactic civilization over a political dispute. No, Alina said firmly, we would destroy galactic civilization to prevent our own extinction. We do not want to use this system. We built it because we had no other choice. When a species is facing systematic genocide, it must find leverage wherever it can. The Mareth delegate's voice was a dangerous growl. We could destroy your home world before your devices even activated. Earth would burn, and then we would find and disable your dead man switch. Alina nodded. You could try, but our system is not based on Earth. It is distributed across hundreds of locations, many of them outside conquered space entirely. You do not know where they are. You do not know how many there are, and even if you found some of them, you would not find all of them before the deadline passed. She smiled slightly. We learned from the species that came before us, War Commander Thay, the Drothex, the Morwen. They all made the same mistake. They tried to fight you with conventional weapons. They tried to play by rules that you had designed to ensure their defeat. We decided to play a different game. Kevon leaned forward. What do you want, human? This was the moment Alina had been waiting for, the moment when the most powerful beings in the galaxy asked a human what she wanted. We want three things, she said. First, full recognition of humanity as a sovereign power with the same rights and privileges as the core species. This includes voting rights in the assembly, access to all trade routes, and the ability to expand into any unclaimed territory without restriction. She paused. Second, the immediate and permanent end to Operation Quiet extinction. All biological agents currently affecting human populations must be identified and neutralized. Medical teams must be sent to every affected colony to repair the damage. That has been done. And third, Kethoron asked, for 63 years, humanity has been denied fair treatment, overcharged for basic services, and excluded from opportunities that other species received freely. We want compensation for these losses. The amount can be negotiated, but it must be significant enough to demonstrate that the conquered takes our grievances seriously. The Morith delegate laughed, a harsh sound that echoed through the chamber. You are demanding tribute from us. You are Nothing but a minor species with a collection of bombs you dare to make demands of the powers that built this galaxy. Alina turned to face him. Directly, yes, War Commander, we dare. Because we have learned something important about power. It is not about the size of your fleet or the age of your civilization. It is about what you are willing to do, and we are willing to do whatever is necessary to survive. She looked around the chamber, addressing all the delegates. I know what you are thinking. You are thinking that the humans are bluffing, that no species would actually destroy the relay network and condemn the galaxy to centuries of isolation, that we are just trying to scare you into making concessions. She shook her head slowly. We are not bluffing. Humans have a long history of choosing destruction over surrender. We have burned our own cities rather than let invaders take them. We have poisoned our own fields rather than feed our enemies. We have fought wars that killed millions of our own people because we refused to submit. Her voice grew harder. You have spent 60 years trying to quietly exterminate us because you were afraid of what we might become. You were right to be afraid, not because we are stronger than you or smarter than you, but because we are stubborn beyond all reason. We do not give up, we do not surrender, and we do not die quietly. Keith Voran was silent for a long moment, then he spoke carefully. Significant, they would require fundamental changes to the structure of the conquered. This is not a decision that can be made quickly. I understand, Alina said. That is why we are giving you 30 days. 30 days to discuss our terms, to verify our capabilities, and to decide how you want to respond. During this time, the dead man switch will remain active. Our delegation will continue to transmit the required codes. But if at the end of 30 days our terms have not been accepted, we will leave the station and return to human space, and the next time we communicate with you, it will be on very different terms. She stepped back from the speaking platform. The choice is yours, High Arbiter. You can continue to treat humanity as a minor species to be controlled and eventually eliminated, or you can accept that the galaxy has changed and that the old ways of doing things are no longer possible. She walked back to the human platform and stood with her fellow delegates. They were all standing straight there, faces calm, their eyes forward. 12 humans against the rulers of the galaxy. Kephoron stared at them for a long time. Then he turned to his fellow core species delegates. They huddled together, whispering in voices too low for anyone else to hear. The junior species watched in silence, afraid to move, afraid to speak, afraid to hope. Finally, Kephoron looked up. Assembly will recess for 1 hour to allow for consultation. When we return, we will provide our initial response to the human demands. The chamber began to empty as delegates filed out to contact their home worlds. Alina watched them go, her heart pounding in her chest. The first phase was complete. Humanity had shown its hand. Now they would see if the galaxy was willing to fold. The hour passed slowly. Alina Vasquez spent it in a small waiting room off the main chamber, surrounded by her fellow delegates. No one spoke much. There was nothing left to say. They had done everything they could. Now they waited to see how the core species would respond. A junior aide, a young man named Marcus, approached Alina with a tablet. Ambassador, we are receiving reports from human space. All fleet assets have reached their designated positions. Colonies have been notified to prepare for possible evacuation. Elena nodded. Good, make sure the emergency protocols are ready to activate at my signal. Marcus hesitated. Ambassador, do you really think it will come to that? Elena looked at him. He was only 24 years old, born on a colony world that had never known anything but conquered rule. He had grown up believing that the galaxy was ordered and stable, that the rules existed to protect everyone. Now he was learning that the rules only protected those who made them. I do not know, Elena said. Honestly, the core species are not used to being challenged. They may decide that destroying humanity is worth the cost of losing the relay network, or they may decide that we are bluffing and call our bluff. I cannot predict what they will do, and if they do attack us. Elena was silent for a moment. Then we will do what humans have always done. We will fight until we cannot fight anymore, and we will make sure that they remember the cost of crossing us for a very long time. The signal came to return to the chamber. Elena led her delegation back to their platform and waited as the room filled with delegates from every corner of the galaxy. The atmosphere was tense. Everyone could feel that something important was about to happen. Hi. Arbiter Keth Thorne took his place on the elevated platform. His face was unreadable, but Elena noticed that his 4 hands were clasped tightly together. The other core species delegates looked equally troubled. Whatever they had decided during the recess, it had not been an easy choice. The session will come to order, Keth Thorne announced. The core species have consulted regarding the human demands. We are now prepared to offer our response. The chamber fell completely silent. The conquered acknowledges that humanity has legitimate grievances regarding its treatment over the past 63 years. We are prepared to discuss reforms to trade policies, tariff structures, and expansion rights. However, the specific demands made by the human delegation go far beyond reasonable accommodation. Elena's heart sank slightly, but she kept her face neutral. K. Thorin continued. Full recognition as a core species is not possible. The criteria for core species status were established 12,000 years ago and cannot be changed by a single vote. The conquered also cannot accept responsibility for alleged biological programs, as these allegations have not been verified by independent observers. He paused. Most importantly, the threat posed by the human dead man switch cannot be allowed to stand. Conquered cannot negotiate under duress. Therefore, we propose the following. Human delegation will immediately deactivate their devices and submit to a formal security review. In exchange, the conquered will establish a committee to investigate human grievances and recommend appropriate reforms within 1 standard year. Elena almost laughed. Committee, a 1-year investigation. It was the oldest trick in the Conquered's playbook. Promised to study the problem, then delay until the problem went away. The humans would disable their only leverage, and within a year they would be quietly eliminated, just as the original plan intended. She stepped forward to the speaking platform. High Arbiter, with respect, this proposal is not acceptable. Kefren's eyes narrowed. It is the only proposal you will receive. Then we are finished here. The words hung in the air like a physical weight. Elena saw shock ripple through the chamber. No species had ever simply rejected a core species proposal. Proper response was to beg for better terms, to accept partial concessions, to show gratitude for whatever scraps were offered. Elena did none of these things. Humanity came to this assembly in good faith, she said. We presented evidence of systematic crimes against our people. We offered terms that would allow us to coexist peacefully with the conquered. We gave you time to consider and respond. Instead, you have offered us nothing. You have asked us to surrender our only protection in exchange for a promise to think about our concerns. This is not negotiation. This is an insult. The Mareth delegate rose, his massive form casting a shadow over half the chamber. You dare speak of insults? You are a minor species that has existed for the blink of an eye. You have no right to demand anything from powers that were building civilizations when your ancestors were hunting with sticks and stones. Elena turned to face him directly. You are correct, War Commander. We are young, we are small. We have existed for only a moment compared to your ancient species, but age does not grant wisdom, and size does not guarantee survival. She looked around the chamber, addressing all the delegates. You have ruled this galaxy for 12,000 years by making other species afraid. You have destroyed civilizations, murdered billions, and called it maintaining order. You have convinced yourselves that you have the right to decide who lives and who dies. Her voice grew stronger. But you forgot something. You forgot that fear works both ways. You made us afraid of you, and you thought that was enough. You never stopped to consider that one day you might have to be afraid of us. She turned back to the core species platforms. We do not want war. We do not want destruction. We want only to live in peace, to grow, to explore, and to build our future. But we will not beg for these things. We will not accept a slow death because you think we are too weak to resist, and we will not let you continue to murder species simply because you think no one can stop you. Keith Voren spoke carefully. If you reject our proposal, you are choosing conflict. The conquered has never lost a war. Your 47 ships cannot stand against our combined fleets. You are right. Elena agreed. We cannot win a war against you, but we can make sure that you do not win either. The relay network is the foundation of everything you have built. Without it, your fleets become scattered groups of ships unable to communicate or coordinate. Your trade routes collapse. Your economies fail. Your empires fragment into isolated worlds that will spend centuries fighting each other for survival. She paused. We do not want this. We take no pleasure in threatening the destruction of galactic civilization, but you have left us no choice. If our only options are extinction or mutually assured destruction, we choose destruction. At least that way we go down fighting. Chamber was completely silent now. Even the constantly buzzing Keth collective had fallen quiet. Elena turned to her delegation and nodded. All 12 humans rose from their seats. The human delegation formally rejects the conquered's proposal, Elena announced. We are withdrawing from this assembly. Immediately, our ships will return to human space within the hour. The dead man switch will remain active. If any core species vessel enters human territory, or if any active aggression is committed against human colonies, the switch will be triggered. She began walking toward the chamber doors. Her delegates followed in a single line, their footsteps echoing in the silence. Cathorne's voice stopped her. Ambassador, Vasquez Elena turned. The High Arbiter was standing now, his forearms hanging. At his sides, for the first time he looked less like an ancient ruler and more like an old man facing something he did not understand. If you do this, there is no going back. The conquered will respond. There will be consequences. Elena met his eyes steadily. There are always consequences. High Arbiter, you taught us that every time you destroyed a species, every time you crushed a rebellion, every time you proved that the conquered's power was absolute, you taught the galaxy that resistance was pointless, but you made one mistake, and what was that? You assumed that everyone would learn the same lesson. Most species learn to be afraid. We learned something different. What did you learn? Elena smiled, but there was no warmth in it, only the cold determination of a species that had decided to stop running. We learned that the conquered was not invincible. We learned that ancient powers could be stupid and arrogant and blind. We learned that if we were smart enough and patient enough and brave enough, we could build weapons that even you could not defeat. She turned back toward the door. You had 63 years to make us your allies. You chose to make us your enemies instead. Now you will live with the consequences of that choice. The human delegation walked out of the assembly chamber. The massive doors closed behind them with a sound that echoed through the room like the closing of a tomb. On the chamber floor, 1,000 delegates sat in stunned silence. Core species looked at each other, searching for answers that none of them had. For the first time in 12,000 years, someone had said no, someone had walked away, someone had refused to play by their rules. And as the reality of what had just happened began to sink in, the Galactic conquered realized something that changed everything. They were afraid, not of the human weapons, not of the dead man's switch. They were afraid because they had seen something in the eyes of the human ambassador that they had never seen before. They had seen a species that was not bluffing, a species that was completely willing to burn everything down rather than submit, a species that had looked at the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy and said no, and they had no idea what to do about it. The human ships jumped to faster than light speed. Exactly 47 minutes after the delegation left the assembly chamber, conquered sensors tracked them as they entered the transit corridor that led back to human space. Then the ships vanished into the void between stars and the Galactic conquered was left alone with its fear. High Orbiter Kethfaran called in emergency session of the core species council. For the first time in centuries, all three powers gathered in the same room, their security officers standing guard at every entrance. Discussions lasted for 18 hours. The Marath war commander spoke first. We must attack immediately, destroy their home world before they have time to prepare, show the galaxy that defiance has consequences, and trigger their dead man's switch. KTH Collective's primary speaker clicked. Angrily, the network would collapse. Our entire civilization depends on those relays. Then we find the devices and disable them, the war commander insisted. We have the largest intelligence network in the galaxy. We can locate human assets. Keith Voron shook his head slowly. The humans have had 60 years to hide these devices. They know our search methods, our sensor capabilities, our blind spots. Even if we found 90% of them, the remaining 10% would be enough to cause catastrophic damage. The council fell into an uneasy silence. For 12,000 years, the core species had faced every challenge with the same basic strategy: overwhelming force, combined with careful manipulation. Enemies who could not be crushed were divided; those who could not be divided were bought; those who could not be bought were destroyed. But humanity fit none of these patterns. They could not be crushed without destroying the relay network. They could not be divided because they were too unified. They could not be bought because they wanted something that money could not provide. And they could not be destroyed without consequences that the core species were not willing to accept. We have never faced an enemy like this, Kevoron admitted. They are not fighting for territory or resources or power. They are fighting for survival, and species fighting for survival are willing to accept losses that rational actors would never consider. The Mareth war commander leaned forward. Then what do you suggest? Surrender to a species that has existed for less than 100 cycles? I suggest we accept reality, Kethvon said. The humans have outmaneuvered us. They saw our plan before we could execute it. They built a weapon we cannot counter, and they demonstrated the will to use it. These are the actions of a mature and dangerous opponent, regardless of their age. The discussions continued for hours more. Intelligence reports arrived constantly, painting an increasingly alarming picture. Human colonies were evacuating non-essential populations to hidden stations deep in uninhabited space. Military vessels were moving to defensive positions around key worlds. Most troubling of all, the humans had begun broadcasting their evidence of Operation Quiet Extinction on every frequency in the galaxy. Within days, every junior species in the Conquered would know the truth about what the core species had done. 3 days after the humans walked out of the assembly, the Fenari formally requested an emergency session to discuss matters of species security. The request was supported by 47 other junior species delegations. For the first time in living memory, the small powers of the galaxy were acting together. They are organizing against us, the Mareth war commander observed. The humans have inspired a rebellion. The humans have done nothing, Kevoron corrected. We did this to ourselves. We built a system based on fear and deception. The humans simply showed everyone what we really are. The following week, Conquered intelligence intercepted a communication between the Fenari government and the human diplomatic corps. The Fenari were offering to share intelligence about core species fleet movements in exchange for human protection. Similar offers were coming from a dozen other junior species. The galaxy was beginning to shift. The old order, which had seemed eternal and unshakable, was showing cracks, and at the center of this chain was a single species that had refused to accept its assigned place. On the 15th day after the walkout, Kethvorin called another meeting of the core species council, but this time his tone was different. I have spent 2 weeks studying the humans, he began, their history, their culture, their psychology. I have read their literature, watched their entertainment, analyzed their wars, and I have reached a conclusion that I do not like but cannot ignore. He looked at his fellow leaders. We made an error in our assessment of this species. We classified them as a threat to be contained and eventually eliminated. We believed that their short history and limited technology made them easy to control. We were wrong, the Keth speaker buzzed impatiently. We already know we made errors. That is why we are in this situation. No, Kev Voran said, the error was not in our tactics. The error was in our fundamental understanding of what humanity is. We treated them as we would treat any other young species. We assumed they would respond to fear and pressure the same way others had responded, but humans are not like other species. He activated a display showing human history, their wars, their revolutions, their moments of crisis. Look at this species. They have nearly destroyed themselves multiple times. They have developed weapons capable of ending all life on their world and then pointed those weapons at each other. They have fought wars that killed millions over ideas that we would consider meaningless. He turned back to the council, but they also did something else. They survived. Every time they reached the edge of destruction, they found a way back. They rebuilt, they grew, they learned, and then they reached into space and found us. The Moreth war commander frowned. What is your point, Pi Arbiter? My point is that humans are not afraid of extinction. They have lived with the possibility of extinction for their entire history. They have stared into the void and continued anyway. When we threatened them with annihilation, we thought we were showing them something new, but we were showing them something they already knew, something they had already faced and conquered. Cathoran sat back in his chair. We cannot break them because they have already been broken and put themselves back together. We cannot scare them because they have already been scared of things far worse than us. We cannot outlast them because they have spent their entire existence surviving against impossible odds. The council chamber was silent. So what do we do? The key speaker asked. Kevoran looked at his ancient colleagues. We do something that the conquered has never done in 12,000 years. We acknowledge that another species has earned the right to stand beside us as equals. We accept their terms. We end operation quiet extinction, and we begin building a new relationship based on something other than fear and exploitation. The Moreth war commander was outraged. You would have us surrender to these creatures? I would have us survive, Kethforon replied. The galaxy is changing. The junior species are awakening. The old ways of maintaining control no longer work. We can fight against this chain and likely destroy ourselves in the process, or we can adapt and find a new way forward. The debate lasted 3 more days. In the end, the core species reached a decision, not through agreement but through exhaustion. None of them wanted to admit defeat, but all of them feared what would happen if the conflict continued. On the 28th day after the walkout, High Arbiter Cathoran transmitted a message to the human diplomatic corps. The message was short and simple. The Galactic conquered accepts humanity's terms. We request a meeting to discuss implementation. The response came within the hour. Meeting accepted. Location: human colony, Kepler 442b. The colony you tried to sterilize. We think it is appropriate that this is where the future begins. 3 days later, Alina Vasquez stood at a podium in the main square of Kepler colony. Behind her, thousands of human colonists watched as the delegation from the core species landed. Around her, cameras broadcast the moment to every corner of the galaxy. High Arbiter Kefirn walked slowly toward the podium. He looked older than Alina remembered, his forearms hanging heavily at his sides. When he reached her, he stopped and looked out at the crowd of humans, watching in silence. "Ambassador Vasquez," he said, "I have come to discuss the terms of our agreement." Alina nodded. "Welcome to human space, High Arbiter. We have much to talk about." The negotiations took months. There were arguments, setbacks, and moments when it seemed like everything would fall apart. But in the end, a new treaty was signed. The Treaty of Kepler, it was called. It recognized humanity as a sovereign power with full rights in the galactic community. It provided compensation for decades of economic harm. It established new rules for the treatment of all species, junior and senior alike. And in a section that many consider the most important, it required the dissolution of the old core species council and its replacement with a new galactic assembly where every species had an equal voice. Years later, historians would debate whether the humans had planned everything from the beginning or simply reacted brilliantly to circumstances as they developed. Some said that Alina Vasquez was the greatest diplomat in galactic history. Others said she was simply lucky. Alina herself never gave a clear answer. When asked about her strategy, she always said the same thing: humans are very good at surviving. When someone threatens our existence, we do not accept it. We do not negotiate with it. We find a way to end it, whatever the cost. The core species thought they knew what they were dealing with. They learned otherwise. And when the history books were written, that was the lesson that survived longest. The galaxy had thought it knew humanity. It had classified them as weak, young, and easy to control. It had been wrong.